Aristotle's Poetics is concept of tragedy, comedy, plot, and catharsis. Aristotle was born in 384 BC at Stagira. He came to Athens at the age of 17 and became a disciple of Plato and stayed with Plato till his death in 347 BC. In 342 BC, he became the tutor to Prince Alexander of Macedon. In 335 BC, he founded the Peripatetic school. He was a voluminous writer and wrote 400 volumes. Dialogues, rhetoric, logic, physics, metaphysics, politics, and poetics were the important works of him. He died in 322 BC. Aristotle is considered as the first scientific literary critic, and his literary criticism is largely embodied in the Poetics. The Poetics is a short treatise of 26 chapters in 45 pages. It seems that the Poetics is not complete as it has only the discussion of tragedy. There must be a second part that is lost, in which the discussion of comedy and satire should be included. The Poetics is an important landmark in the literary criticism. It is an attempt to arrive at the truth rather than the ascertaining of some preconceived notions. As Aristotle's methods are exploratory and tentative, it contains so much that is of permanent and universal interest in it. According to Aristotle, imitation, mimesis, is the common basis of all the fine arts, but they differ from each other in their medium, manner, and objects of imitation. Thus, poetry differs from painting and music in its medium of imitation. Poetry itself is divisible into epic and dramatic on the basis of its manner of imitation. Here, the epic narrates while the dramatic represents through action. The dramatic poetry itself is distinguished as tragic or comic on the basis of its objects of imitation. Tragedy imitates a noble character, whereas a comedy imitates a mean character. Tragedy imitates men as better and comedy as worse than they really are. Thus, he differentiates tragedy from the other kinds of poetry. Aristotle considers tragedy superior to epics, as all the parts of an epic are included in tragedy. But all that of tragedy are not found in epics. Aristotle defines tragedy as the imitation of an action, serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in a language beautified in different parts with different kinds of embellishments, through actions and not narrations, and through scenes of pity and fear, bringing about the catharsis of emotions. According to Aristotle, tragedy has six parts, namely plot, character, diction, reasoning, spectacles, and song. As tragedy imitates action, the action that it imitates is plot. So, the plot should consist of a logical and inevitable sequence of events. The action must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It must be long enough to permit an orderly development of an action to a catastrophe. Aristotle divides the plots of tragedy mainly into two kinds, simple and complex. In a tragedy with a simple plot, the change in the fortunes of the hero takes place without any peripeteia and anagnorisis. An ideal tragic plot, according to Aristotle, must not be simple, it must be complex. That is, it must have peripeteia, which means reversal of intention, the opposite that are intended, or ignorance of truth, and anagnorisis, which means recognition of truth or realization of truth. The ideal tragedy is a story where an unexpected catastrophe or a calamity happens due to a false move blindly made by a friend, kinsman, or by the hero himself. It is a tragedy brought about not by the deliberate purpose of some evil agent, not by mere chance, but by human error. Hamartia is the tragic error of the hero. He may err innocently, unknowingly, without any evil intention at all. The miscalculation of the hero causes a chain of incidents that result in the change from good fortune to bad fortune. Thus, hamartia becomes an inevitable one to the tragic plot. Similarly, both peripeteia and anagnorisis are incidents, and so they too become parts of the plot. They are actually bringing a change from friendship to hostility and vice versa. The ignorance and the recognition of some truth can be caused by separate incidents. They may be easily combined in the same incidents. Aristotle considers this combined form to be the most effective one. Here, Aristotle cites King Oedipus from Sophocles' Oedipus Rex as the best example of this combined reversal recognition one. Oedipus killed his father Laius and became king of Thebes, married his mother Jocasta. Having realized the truth, gouged out his eyes and banished himself. Aristotle also talks about a third kind of plot that depends on the incidents of suffering and depicts murder, torture, and death. He rates it very low and says that it indicates a deficiency in the art of the poet. According to Aristotle, as tragedy idealizes, it imitates menace better, and as comedy caricatures, it shows menace worse. Aristotle does not consider poetic justice, the rewards and punishments to the good and evil, as necessary for the tragedy, as the suffering is far in excess of the fault or error of the hero. But he regards it more keeping with the spirit of comedy. He rules out plots with a double end, that is, the plots in which there is happiness for some of the characters and misery for others. Such double ending weakens the tragic effect, and hence it must be avoided. Thus, Aristotle is against tragic comedy. Aristotle also opines that perfectly good as well as utterly wicked persons are not suitable to be heroes of tragedies. So, an ideal tragic hero is a man who stands midway between the two extremes. His misfortune is brought upon him by some fault of his own. The Greek word hamartia means missing the mark or miscalculation. This error may arise from any of the three ways: ignorance, hasty or careless view of anything, by mistake. In our sympathy for the sufferer on the stage, we forget our own troubles and worries. Fear is the impulse to withdraw, and pity is the impulse to approach. Both these impulses are harmonized and blended in tragedy, and this balance brings relief and repose. The function of a tragedy is to arouse the emotion of pity and fear in the minds of the viewers, and in this way affecting the catharsis of the emotions. The Greek word catharsis has actually three meanings. It means purgation, purification, and clarification. In the tragedy, the spectator sees that it is the tragic error or hamartia of the hero which results in suffering, and so he learns something about the universal relation between character and destiny. So there is some purgation and purification. As catharsis leads to an enhanced understanding of the universal law, it is intellectual. So there is some clarification too. The Poetics is a comprehensive treatise on the art of writing plays. It is a textbook of practical instruction and guidance, immediately useful for would-be poets and dramatists. It tells us clearly what is the real aim of drama and about the ways and means by which the aim of drama can be achieved. Aristotle's theory regarding the nature of poetic imitation and the peculiar pleasure of tragedy has been the basis of all subsequent discussions of these topics up to date. As Aristotle was a man of universal intelligence, in whatever sphere he worked, he looked solely and steadfastly at the object. That is why even today the Poetics continues to be studied and prescribed as textbook in schools and colleges all over the world.